Okay, everybody, thanks for being patient. The technologies were giving me a little bit of trouble getting here. Some of the videos I wanted to show weren't working, so we're going to actually maybe switch from one PowerPoint to the other if I need to make those work. I've got some pretty powerful videos here. I got to stay right in here, right? This is my zone. This is my happy space right here. Okay. Um, they're recording all this for you guys, so. Well, I'm going to be teaching today on preparing for the coming prophecies in this session. Can I get a little more bass when he gets back there? Can you all hear me out there? Okay. Of course, we've got our resources out on the table there. I'll be referring to those throughout the presentation, so I won't spend a lot of time on them right now. We do have implemented in our ministry now on our website at prophecydepot.com what we call Prophecy Newsstand, and every day we update current news events that have biblical implications, and we would encourage you to stay apprised as to what's going on with the current events that are relevant to Iran and America and ISIS and things like that. We put a heavy emphasis on the stuff that's going on with Iran right now, the Iran deal, etc. And you can go to my website at prophecydepot.com, and right on the top it says Newsstand, and you just click on that, it'll get you right in there. Like I said, I'm going to be talking about preparing for the coming prophecies. I believe that we're at a juncture in time where we're going to see the literal fulfillment of a Bible prophecy, or maybe prophecies plural, in the very near future. Can we get a few more chairs? Are there any more around? Are they bringing some more? Great, because I know there's some people over there too that need them. Okay. I also want to tell you, I mentioned at the banquet, who was at the banquet last night? Okay, I talked about, do people get a second chance at salvation after the rapture if they'd heard the gospel beforehand but didn't make a decision or had rejected Christ? And I gave 6 reasons. Well, I gave 5 reasons. I was supposed to give 6. So I want to give those of you that were there yesterday, I want to give you the 6th reason that I glanced over, which I think is very important. The 6th reason is that after the rapture, we're going to estimate maybe hundreds of thousands or millions of people that will be left behind will have heard about the gospel. I mean, we don't have a number on that, but it only takes one of them to drop to their knees and accept Christ after the rapture to nullify that teaching that there is no second chance at salvation after the rapture. Just one person that's looking across the table and they see their mother gone and go, oh, that's the rapture she was talking about, and drops to her knees. Now, I hope I also put it on, expounded upon it intensely enough to realize that I'm not trying to give a parent or someone who's concerned about a loved one wiggle room here and say, oh, gee, I don't have to worry about it because they're going to get a second chance at salvation. As I specified, choosing Christ after the rapture and when the deception's going on is going to be very difficult, because it'll be a death sentence, and because the deception will be making the other choices more persuasive. So enough time on that. I also introduced this DVD that we just came out with a couple months ago. Prophecy in the News has been featuring it on their TV shows, and we've got a limited supply out on the table. It's with Jonathan Cahn, Mark Biltz, and myself. I'm going to play the trailer to the DVD because it's going to segue into my talk. Now, it's a 4-disc DVD with individual interviews with Jonathan Cahn, individual interviews with Mark Biltz, and with myself, that they put into a TV show. And also, you see another individual's picture up there named Troy Duhan, and he is the producer of God's Not Dead TV, and he did a powerful testimony on the DVD. I'm going to try to shift to the other thing to play that, if it'll work here.
You need to be scared. You need to be concerned. And you need to get your butts moving out of New Orleans. This is the mother of all storms. This is the storm of the century.
As I sat on the levee, I reflected as one by one our hedge of protection was removed until the floodwaters eventually overtook and destroyed our city. As I pondered on these events, I couldn't help but to wonder if there wasn't another storm of enormous magnitude that was approaching our nation. A storm that couldn't be measured by the human eye, by barometric pressures, by colliding fronts, or even in a Richter scale, but is measured by the sins of its people. And I had to wonder and ask myself, is that a storm approaching this nation today? This story is about that approaching storm and the concerns for this great nation, America as we know it. Is that we know that when the season comes, God says we don't know the day, we don't know the hour, we don't know the moment, but we know the season.
Yeah, he rebuked the Pharisees for not understanding the signs of the times.
If the blood moons are relevant and the Shemitah is relevant, then there is a likelihood that you're going to have a major episode happen in the Middle East. It can't go much longer. It's like a pressure cooker that's about to burst in the Middle East.
I believe a great shaking is coming to this land, coming to America, coming to the world. It will involve the collapse of the financial realm, the economic realm, and will be greater than that. And will change things, even change the course of history.
We're not just talking about just religion. We're talking about events that are going to shape this entire world. Mm-hmm. Every man, woman, and child.
They're saying all the danger signs that were there at the last crash are there now.
When we talk about Bible prophecies, 2015 may be a year where we see the literal fulfillment of a Bible prophecy. We don't know this for sure, but these guys are pointing to some very big warnings right here.
From a prophetic standpoint, we're very close.
And your timeline here, I'll be shocked if we don't see the fulfillment of 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 different Bible prophecies. We've only talked about a couple of.
There's the potential we could see the beginning of the tribulation occurring, but I don't know. We'll have to watch and see.
But the warning is, Shemitah in Hebrew can mean the release, but it can also mean the collapse or the fall. And so the warning is that if America does not return to God, America is rapidly departing from God and driving him out and defying his ways. If America doesn't return to God, that its crown as the head of nations, the American age as we know, as we've all known it, will collapse. And it's even beginning to collapse even this year.
So Jonathan's talking about a shaking. But what shaking could he be talking about? What would cause that shaking? What is the pressure cooker that's about to burst in the Middle East that I was talking about? What are the prophecies that might happen? And will we be here for them? If the Lord tarries, I think we could experience some prophecies, very powerful prophecies. Remember, when God issues prophecies, these are global impacting events in the last days prophecies. The Shemitah that Jonathan was talking about ends the 7-year cycle on September 13th, the 29th of Elul. Will that be significant? The super blood moon that Mark Biltz talks about, the final one comes that will be seen in Israel. It's a super blood moon because the moon will be at its closest to the earth in its normal orbit, and that will be on Passover of September 28th. So what we're going to look at right now is where we are at right now in God's prophetic timeline, because we want to deal with, in my estimation, it's most important to know where we're at. I know it's important to talk about the 4 final religions like I did yesterday and things like that, but what we need to prepare for is what's going to happen in the very, very near future. There are 2 marquee events that I've got up on the timeline right now. One is the rebirth of the nation of Israel, and when Israel was rebirthed in 1948, the world's hourglass did its final turn, and the end times began. Most of your Bible prophecy teachers will tell you that is sort of when the end times kicked in. That's a marquee event. Israel is the centerpiece of God's plan. He is going to uphold his holy name through Israel. I'll go through that in a moment. And he's going to do that in the Magog invasion, the Gog of Magog invasion in Ezekiel 38 and 39. A very powerful event. I'll spend a little bit of time on that because it's very important. Very, very powerful event. These are the 2 marquee events. We are marching towards Ezekiel 38 and 39, where God is going to uphold his holy name. He's going to put the world on official notice that he's holy. So let's talk about how important Israel. We'll just spend a moment on that. I know most of you probably already realize that. But unfortunately, a lot of the most of the world and a lot of the Christian churches think that Israel is not a miracle of God. They don't see God's conspicuous fingerprints all over Israel in fulfillment of prophecy. They think it's a moral obligation of the United Nations after the Holocaust. And we're told in Jeremiah 23 the significance of Israel, this regathering. He says, therefore, behold, the days are coming, says the Lord, that they shall no longer say, as the Lord lives, who brought up the children of Israel from the land of Egypt, but as the Lord lives, who brought up and led the descendants of the house of Israel from the north country and from all the countries where I had driven them, and they shall dwell in their own land. So what he's saying right there is that they, referring to the Jewish people, are to recognize that this present regathering that's going on right now is even bigger than the parting of the Red Seas and the exodus out of Egypt, which was what they were to memorialize, the Hebrews and Israelites, throughout their history, the significance of how God delivered them out of the bondage. He parted the Red Seas, you know the story, and no one has been able to do that since. That is a big miracle. Can we all agree on that? Well, what he's saying now is this is even bigger. This is what they need to reflect on, and the church, generally speaking, is not getting it. Is Israel a moral obligation of the United Nations? Let's see what God had to do. Why is this so momentous? He had to implant Zionism in the hearts of the Jewish people worldwide. They had been dispersed out into the nations of the world for over 1,800 years with different cultures, different languages. Many of them have forgotten their heritage, and he had to put it on their hearts to want to go back into Israel, into their homeland. And the father of Zionism was one of the ones that led toward that inkling inside the Jewish people. At the first Jewish Congress in Basel in 1897, he said, I founded the Jewish state. If I had said this out loud today, I would be answered by universal laughter. If not in 5 years, certainly in 50, everyone will know it. Well, it so happens 50 years later, to the exact year, this was in Theodor Herzl's diary. Theodor Herzl wrote the book Der Judenstaat, which means the Jewish state, which essentially said we need to go back into our homeland to escape anti-Semitism. They're going to try to kill us. And he was absolutely right. World War I and World War II followed. Well, 50 years later, as he said, not realizing it, the United Nations in 1947 legislated the reestablishment of the nation of Israel, UN Resolution 181. I'm getting a little bit of static kind of stuff. He had to create Arab homelands because that area had been controlled by the Ottoman Empire from 1517 to 1917, and you could not get Israel into that area. He had to change the whole landscape of the Middle East, and we know that it all got rezoned after the Ottoman Empire made the wrong choice and chose to side with the Germans in World War I, and they got defeated, and then the British and the French took over the area, and you see that the Arab states started to get created. And you also see, Egypt in 1922, Lebanon 1943, Iran 1935, and then Israel, of course, in 1948. Now there could be an Israel. God had to make that happen on the geography of the area. He had to prevent Nazi genocide. So after World War I, the land was being prepared for the people. And then he had to prevent the Nazi genocide. And in that, when he did, he had to empower the Allied forces to come against that. These are sovereign events, nothing that the United Nations could ever do. Greater than parting the Red Seas, to do all these things. Now, World War II prepared the people for the land. World War I prepared the land for the people. He had to create the Jewish state, which he did in 1948, even though all the Arabs around them voted against it. He had to empower the Israeli army, and we find out in Bible prophecy the Israeli Defense Forces exist in fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And I'll be talking a whole lot about that tomorrow night in my presentation, of what they're about to do to their enemies over there. And he has to preserve and prosper Israel for his plans that he's got to do. And we know Israel is going to be very prosperous because the Israel described in Ezekiel 38 is very, very prosperous. So here's where we're at on God's prophetic timeline. Let's be clear. That was 67 years ago. Now we're in 2015, and we are looking like the Gog of Magog invasion is very, very near because the relationships between Russia and Iran have never been stronger. They've got contracts to build more nuclear power plants in there. They're going to send their S-300 missile defense system over to Iran, which is a very dangerous situation, which will probably force Israel to preempt a strike on them in the very near future. Matter of fact, a quote today or yesterday from the defense minister of Israel, Moshe Ya'alon, said in the Der Spiegel German press, it was quoted by the Times of Israel, that we are considering airstrikes on military sites in Iran. That's what the defense minister stated publicly. So Ezekiel 38 is very near. Why is that such an important event? 52 verses, the Gog of Magog invasion, that you can walk away from. You don't have to be a scholar to understand something from that. God made that prophecy easy to understand because he's going to uphold his holy name in that prophecy. He gives us, it's in the latter years. He tells us who's going to be involved. He tells us how they're going to be defeated. He's going to defeat them through fire and brimstone and earthquakes. It's not going to be America. It's not going to be the Israeli Defense Forces. It's going to be God himself. It tells us what's going to happen afterwards. They're going to gain renown as a nation when they convert fuel for 7 years and bury the dead for 7 months. So we have all these specific details, more specificity in those verses than probably anywhere else combined when you look at the and that's why God wants people to know about it. And we're getting very, very near, but is it next? What is going to happen in the middle between now and then? We're at 2015, and how soon till Ezekiel 38 will happen? How soon until God will put the world on notice that he's the holy God? I think it's drawing very, very near, but I don't think it's next. But this is why it's important. He says in Ezekiel 39:7, I will make my holy name known in the midst of my people Israel. I will not let them profane my holy name anymore. Then the nation shall know that I am the Lord, the Holy One in Israel. This is the promise-keeping God that we worship. This is the promise-keeping God who made an unconditional covenant with Abraham 4,000 years ago that he would have descendants forever, a chosen people, that they would have a promised land on which they could dwell forever. And that would be the promised land of Israel, which is much bigger than what we see today. I'll be showing maps in this presentation and the next one. It goes from the river of Egypt, the Nile, to the river Euphrates. Israel only occupies a very small part of that presently. Folks, that's about to change. The world's trying to shrink Israel. Don't count on it. Don't count on it. Iran's wanting to wipe Israel off the map. Don't count on it. God is going to uphold his holy name through his people, in the midst of his people Israel. Just a brief summary of Ezekiel 38. It's spearheaded by Russia. Most of us would teach that. Gog of Magog. And then here's a consensus of who else is involved. It's a coalition of 9. And you see that you've got Turkey and Iran and some other countries there. And these are all predominantly Muslim, by the way, except for Russia. And I want you to notice they're way outside the borders of Israel. None of them share common borders with Israel. And none of them have been Israel's notorious enemies, except once upon a time Iran during the time of Esther. None of them. But they will be big enemies of Israel in the very, very near future. They're going to come against Israel that's dwelling securely. And we have to ask ourselves, is Israel dwelling in the kind of conditions that we're told in Ezekiel 38 verses 7 through 12, so that Russia will then be ready to come against them? And here's what we have to look at. Because if they're not dwelling in these conditions, then this prophecy is not quite ready to happen, as near as it may be. They regathered from the nations in the latter years, brought back from the sword, the persecution, into a land which had long been desolate. Yes, they have. And that is still going on. But do they dwell in the midst or the center of the land as a peaceful people dwelling securely without walls, bars, nor gates, having gold and silver and acquired livestock and goods, a wealthy nation possessing great booty and great plunder? Because that's what Russia is coming after. They're coming after that Israel that's dwelling in those conditions. And we have to ask ourselves, are all of those conditions being met? Well, they're not dwelling without walls, bars, nor gates, if you look at that literally. They have a 403-mile wall that at various points is 20 feet high of concrete and security fence at other parts to keep terrorism out of Israel. Matter of fact, the Middle East is the most fenced-in and fortified region in the entire world. It is so apocalyptic over there right now. You see a map up here of existing fences to keep terrorism and problems out of certain countries. And you see proposed fences coming on. You see that down in Saudi Arabia is proposing a fence to take out all of Yemen so that they can keep the Houthis out, which are the head Shiite terrorist group sponsored by Iran. Saudi Arabia is very concerned. Israel's building a fence. They've already got one underneath Egypt. They've got one to the north by Lebanon. And now they're proposing to build one through parts of Jordan now because they're very concerned about ISIS moving into the Sinai, which they have already done, and they've aligned themselves with the Anwar al-Bayt terrorist group and have been lobbing some missiles in, and they're also hooking up with Hamas, and they're very concerned about Jordan. And I'm going to be getting into some prophecies about Jordan more so tomorrow night. Jordan is going to be in serious trouble real soon. And so they're proposing to build a fence around Jordan. So we need to look at this dwelling securely. Is Israel dwelling securely? And the Hebrew words that Ezekiel uses are yeshav v'thak. He uses them twice, and they mean dwelling safely. And when you look at the biblical precedent for that, it means they're dwelling securely not because they gave up land for peace and America's guaranteeing it. They're dwelling securely because they win a war, and now they're not worried about their enemies being a problem anymore. That's the nature of that. So if they're not dwelling securely now, when will they be dwelling securely? Well, Ezekiel tells us that too, 10 chapters earlier, when he says in Ezekiel 28, verses 24 through 26, "Thus says the Lord God, when I have gathered the house of Israel from the peoples among whom they are scattered, and am hallowed in the sight of them in the Gentiles, then they will dwell in their own land, which I gave my servant Jacob, and they will dwell safely," yeshav v'thak, the same words. "They will build houses and plant vineyards, and they will dwell securely." He echoes it again, yeshav v'thak. When? When I execute judgments on all those around them who despise them, then they shall know that I am the Lord their God. Does Israel have people sharing common borders around them who does not like them, who did not vote for an Israel in 1947, who came to war against them in 1948, 1967, 1973, out from which terrorist populations have spawned? They do. And they're not in Ezekiel 38 and 39. They're not listed anywhere, although Ezekiel's very specific about who is listed. You will find none of these people. But they're in Psalm 83, which was written by Asaph. I'll spend a moment on that in a second. This is who the enemies around them that despise them. In Psalm 83, Lebanon, Syria, Hezbollah comes out of Lebanon. They've got 100,000 missiles. Israel's concerned that in the next war with Hezbollah, 1,500 missiles will fly in daily, and they're concerned about 4,000 casualties in the first week. They're already preparing for this. Jordan, Iraq. Of course, you got the Palestinians are a key player in Psalm 83, the Palestinian refugees, and I get into this stuff in my works out there. Hamas, Egypt, and now you've got to throw in ISIS. And I'm going to tomorrow night try to unpack for you where I believe ISIS is in Psalm 83. And if they go unchecked, it's very probable that they are in Psalm 83. So now if Ezekiel 38 is not quite ready to happen just yet, because Israel's not dwelling securely without walls, bars, nor gates, because judgments have to be executed upon those who despise them that are all around them, then we have to put something in the gap between 2015 and the existence of Ezekiel 38. The coming of it. And I believe that would be Psalm 83. Okay, let's talk about that for a minute. Now I've got a circle there, and that's got the ancient names of the people listed in Psalm 83 on their modern day equivalents. I call them an inner circle because they share common borders with Israel. I call the Magog invaders an outer ring because they share no common borders with Israel. Asaph wrote Psalm 83 3,000 years ago, and he wrote 12 psalms, and he was King David's worship leader, and we also are told that he was a prophet, a seer in 2 Chronicles 29:30, where it says, King Hezekiah and the leaders commanded the Levites to sing praise to the Lord with the words of David and of Asaph the seer. The Hebrew word is kuzah, means beholder of vision, a prophet like Jeremiah, like Isaiah. And the most prophetic psalms he wrote was Psalm 50 and Psalm 83. And here's how he starts Psalm 83. I'm not going to do an intensive study on Psalm 83 because most of you have heard me teach on it. Do not keep silent, O God. Do not hold your peace, and do not be still, O God. Now, I think God is already answering this petition right here in verse 1 by not keeping silent. I talked about this last night. In March of this year, I was on the TBN TV show for about the 6th time, and I was with Perry Stone, hosted it, Jonathan Kahn, and Mark Biltz. And that's the DVD I showed earlier is different than this. That show's been aired 6 times in the last 6 months because it's so popular. It's on track to be the most popular show in their 40-year history. Now, I know some of you have different thoughts about TBN, and I don't advocate that every show on TBN is great. What I'm saying is it's the largest Christian show in the world, and it's reaching millions and millions of people. Hundreds of thousands of people are watching it on the internet on many different postings that's going on because people are concerned that something's about to happen. And that what is that shaking is the kind of prophecies that I'm talking about. These kind of prophecies would cause such a shaking. Are they about to happen? Asaph goes on to say, For behold, your enemies make a tumult, and those who hate you have lifted up their head. They have taken crafty counsel against your people, and consulted together against your sheltered ones. They have said, Come and let us cut them off from being a nation. that the name of Israel may be remembered no more. For they have consulted together with one consent, they form a confederacy against you. They want to wipe Israel off of the map, this confederacy. So here's in a summary. You see the belligerents on the right side of the screen, Lebanon, Hezbollah. We showed that map a moment ago. Here's their motive. They want to destroy the nation of Israel. They confederate to do that. We've seen that this prophecy has been processing itself. They've come against Israel in 1948, 67, and 73. We're told in verse 12 that they want to take the pastures of God for themselves as a possession. So they want, if this is a prophecy for our time, I'm watching for it. Do your own homework. They don't want peace with the Jews. They don't want a two-state solution. They want one more Arab state, and they want to fly the flag of Palestine over it. And I think Asaph was warning us 3,000 years ago, when you see Israel in the land and these belligerents coming against them with this ancient hatred that they've always had, and the Palestinian refugees, who I think he identifies in the psalm as the tents of Edom, get ready for the fulfillment of this prophecy. I get into these things on my Psalm 83 book out there with the DVDs that go with it. This is the #1 selling book in the history of Prophecy in the News TV. So it's out there on my table. And if you want to know how this will apply in your lifetimes, like I've done a novel called Revelation Road. It's a partial novel and rest of its commentary. We've got a limited supply out there. How is Psalm 83 and the destruction of Damascus and the Jeremiah prophecy of Elam that I'll be talking a little bit about, how is that going to affect you and your family? So I tried to put a scenario together as a grandparents are concerned their grandson are going through these prophecies. So, okay, let's move and talk about Isaiah 17. I just mentioned it. There's a prophecy written between 740 and 701 BC by Isaiah dealing with Damascus in Isaiah 17. And I believe that's a peripheral prophecy to Psalm 83. It's a big deal. And what he says in there is that Damascus is going to be destroyed. And I believe that's going to happen before Ezekiel 38. So we got to fit that into that little tiny cubbyhole space. We got a time going here. Isaiah 17:1 says, the burden against Damascus, behold, Damascus will cease from being a city, and it will be a ruinous heap. The Hebrew words are literally reduced to rubble. It's the oldest continuously inhabited city in recorded history, dates back to the time of Abraham. It is the capital of Syria. It's in shambles right now with the Syrian revolution that's going on. But some people believe this prophecy found fulfillment in 732 BC by the Assyrian Empire, but we find out that that couldn't be the case because we're told in verse 9 that in that day his strong city, speaking of Syria, will be as a forsaken bough and an uppermost branch which they left because of the children of Israel, not Assyria. And there will be desolation in these strong cities. And we're seeing a lot of desolation going on in these strong cities, but not because of the children of Israel, because of the children of ISIS, right? And the Syrian revolution and that sort of thing that's going on. So it's the children of Israel, the Israeli Defense Forces is what I would say in there. And here's the concern. It happens overnight. Then behold, at eventide trouble, and before the morning he, referring to Damascus in the masculine pronoun, is no more. He's gone. Damascus is reduced to rubble. This is the portion of those who plunder us and the lot of those who rob us, giving us the motive. Why Israel had to deal with this issue is because they were being plundered and robbed and that sort of thing. Okay. Now, some people think because Damascus is really in a lot of trouble right now, that this prophecy is finding fulfillment. But these details are pretty specific. It's not coming down brick upon brick. It's going to come down overnight. One night you're going to see Damascus, and one morning he is no more. And it's not the Assyrian Empire. It's going to be the Israeli Defense Forces. And as you read the prophecy, it's not because they're aggressive. It's because they've got to defend themselves for their survival. They're not going to experience another genocide, and that's exactly what Iran and some of these people want. Let's speak about Iran. When we talk about Iran, let's talk about their nuclear program. Okay, most of you might be familiar with Iran's future when you look at Ezekiel 38, because Iran is listed in Persia in this Gog of Magog invasion. I had them on the map. But there's another prophecy that's been vastly overlooked that I've been writing about and with my latest works that Jeremiah wrote about in Jeremiah chapter 49. And I believe that happens in this gap of time. So we're talking about three big prophecies right now: Psalm 83, Isaiah 17, and Jeremiah 49. And I personally think Jeremiah 49 will precede all of them. These are big prophecies. Iran has double jeopardy in the end times, because not all of Iran is in Ezekiel 38. There's Persia and Elam. And when you look at a modern day map, Persia, you see with the green arrow there, comprises about 5/6 of Iran, and Elam hugs the Persian Gulf, and it's a small portion over there, but that's where the Bushehr nuclear reactor is, which is a nuclear disaster waiting to happen, built on 3 tectonic plates in a country that's 90% seismic. It's a very dangerous facility, and I think the prophecy talks about a nuclear prophecy. So we had Jeremiah writing in 596 BC this prophecy about Elam, ancient Elam. Ezekiel wrote afterwards, about a decade later, about Ezekiel 38. So in my works, I show you why they're not the same prophecy, as best as I can do my research on that. So Ezekiel and Jeremiah are warning us about the future of Iran. And I've written a book with a DVD that goes with it out there, and I'm going to try to play the trailer on that, if I can get to the other one. Because it will pretty much sum up the teaching. I'm not going to teach on the whole thing. Thanks for your patience. Normally it flows better. This should work.
The most important thing today, not only today, but in a historical perspective, the most important thing is to make sure that a militant regime, a militant Islamic regime or a militant Islamic movement does not get its hands on the weapons of mass destruction.
Missiles cloud Mideast skies over the Persian Gulf. Iran shuts down the Strait of Hormuz. Arab oil is choked off to world markets. Hezbollah and Hamas launch scores of missiles into Israel. Terror cells initiate cycles of violence in America. About 2,600 years ago, the Hebrew prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel issued parallel end times prophecies concerning modern-day Iran. Today, the rogue country is becoming a nuclear nation and aggressively advancing its hegemony throughout the greater Middle East. Nuclear Showdown in Iran, revealing the ancient prophecy of Elam, is a non-fiction thriller taking the reader on a journey of discovery through the eyes of the prophets and the minds of today's key national players. But there's a backstory, an even bigger story. It's a spiritual showdown in Iran between Islam and Christianity.
Iran is being transformed into a Christian nation in this generation. Iran has the fastest growing evangelical population in the world. Iranians are experiencing miracles, healings, visions, and dreams. And with the help of satellite television, millions of them are coming to Christ. 2 years ago, Iranian government began cracking down on Christianity. But it's not working. Christianity is growing in Iran. Iran is in the Bible prophecy, and many Iranian Christians are excited about what the Bible says about the future of Iran. Please pray for your brothers and sisters in Iran.
That is Hormuz Shariat. Joe Rosenberg calls him the Billy Graham of Iran. He reaches into Iran over the heads of the mullahs through satellite television 24/7, and we're watching through works like that. And TBN has a program, and CBN has a program that does the same. That Iran has become the #1 growing evangelical population in the world, growing at a rate of 19.6% per year, and through miracles, dreams, and visions and healings, which is something God does, right, folks? Okay. I'm going to try to spend a little more time talking about this because it's very encouraging to us and our Christianity over here in America. Time permitting, I'm going to cover more on that in just a moment. But this prophecy deals with the Lord being fiercely angry. It's Jeremiah 49, verses 34 through 39. Verse 37 says there's going to come a time that God is going to be fiercely angry. He's going to be furious with Iran because, we're told in the subsequent verse, there's bad leadership. He says he's going to destroy from there the kings and the princes. And you don't destroy good leadership. Why? We're told in the beginning of the prophecy, because they want to launch something somewhere, something powerful somewhere. Because he says he's going to prevent that. He's going to break the bow of Elam at the foremost of its might. And afterwards, when this judgment happens, it leads to a disaster, we're told in the prophecy, an epic disaster. That the indigenous population in that area of Elam, the Iranians there, it says they will be dispersed into the nations. It says there will be no nations, plural, where they don't go. It's a worldwide dispersion. Sounds like a humanitarian crisis. I'm here to tell you, as I've studied this throughout the history of Iran, since Jeremiah wrote this prophecy about 2,600 years ago, the anger of the Lord is now against Iran. You know, Obama thinks he's got a sweetheart deal going with Iran, and Benjamin Netanyahu thinks it's the worst deal imaginable, but God is furious. And we're heading toward Ezekiel 38 and 39, and he's going to uphold his holy name and put the world on official notice that he's the Lord, and he's not going to let Iran wipe Israel off of the map. I believe that the smoke is coming out of the Lord's nostrils, and any nation or key world leader that gets in his way right now is going to get hammered. And that goes for us here. I've been on Hormoz's show many times. He wants me to teach him about the rapture and these prophecies that you're hearing about, and he translates it into Farsi. I'm in constant communication with some of the key leaders in the underground church in Iran, and we're preparing them for these prophecies, and I'll try to spend a little more time on that in a moment. So we talked about Psalm 83. We talked about Damascus. We talked about Jeremiah 49, the nuclear prophecy it appears to be in Iran. But what about America? What about America? You know, I'm going to point out tomorrow that the America that we live in right now, the greatest superpower that ever lived, is not going to be a superpower much longer. And I'm going to point out where we are in Bible prophecy. And we're looking at the decline of America even now. And this is what Jonathan Cahn is warning about. And I'll pinpoint for you where I believe we are in Bible prophecy and why I can argue the point that we're not a superpower nation that we once were. I'm going to take a moment to tell you where that is right now, but in more detail tomorrow night. In Ezekiel 38 and 39, this big marquee event that we're headed towards, it's near, it's not next. We not only have the belligerents in Russia's confederacy, and we not only have Israel that's going to come under attack once it's dwelling securely, we have these merchants of Tarshish and their young lions, which will say to Russia, have you come to take plunder? Have you gathered your army to take booty, to carry away silver and gold, to take away livestock and goods, to take away great plunder? And that's why we know the motive. One of the reasons we know the motive of Russia is not to take the land like they want in Psalm 83. It's to take the prosperity and their livelihood. So who are these people on the sidelines that appear to be protesting this major prophecy? Sheba and Dedan. Sheba would be where Yemen is. And some people say that moves in over toward the GCC, Gulf Cooperative States over there, the Arab Emirates. Dedan would be where Saudi Arabia is. But who are the Tarshish and their merchants, the merchants of Tarshish and their young lions? Well, the two predominant teachings on this, the first one, which is very weak, I'm going to let you do your own homework, I've studied it and I don't buy it, is that it's Spain, Tarshish is Spain, and the young lions would be the South America or the Latino countries that came out from the colonies of Spain. That's one of the arguments. The other argument, more prevalent, is that Tarshish is the UK. I'm going to give you all the reasons tomorrow, biblically and geographically, and modern geopolitical scene as to why I agree with this one. And the young lions would be places like America. Any way you look at it, someone wants to have commerce with that Israel, because he's talking about the merchants of Tarshish. He's not talking about the entertainers or the athletes or the politicians or the soldiers. So the merchants of Tarshish are standing on the sidelines going, we want to have commerce with them in Russia. You're going to try to deprive that. You're going to try to take that from Israel. J.R. Church, the founder of Prophecy in the News, wrote in his book Guardians of the Grail, and I think they just recently published this again, so you're going to want to get your hands on this. It says, an inscription discovered in 1780 on a cliff above Mount Hope Bay in Bristol, Rhode Island, contained an engraving that read, Voyagers from Tarshish, this stone proclaims. Is believed to be inscribed around 533 BC. Harvard University has found 5 locations within the United States where the merchants of Tarshish had colonies. So I'll go more into this tomorrow so you can feel comfortable that I'm not just speculating about America's existence. America was founded by God for 4 primary purposes: to be a safe haven for the Jewish people. That's why we have about 5 million Jewish people living here, recently surpassed by Israel with about 6 million. The closest country next to that is France with 483,500, and they're leaving there quickly because that place is becoming really bad if you've been watching the news. A beacon of Christianity. We were to get the gospel out to the nations of the world, and you look at the church age, no nation has ever done more to get the gospel out into the nations of the world than America. We once were a Christian nation, weren't we? The rebirth of the nation of Israel. The UK, I'll show you the mistake they made in 1917 when they didn't honor the Balfour Declaration. So we were called upon in substitute to rebirth the nation of Israel. And we did do that, and I'll go into that tomorrow as well. And we are to be a supporter and protector of Israel. God didn't give us all this beauty and these resources because of our granddaddy's good looks. He had plans for us. And we're transgressing a lot of dangerous biblical boundaries right now. What are we doing? Israel needs more land to be safe. Its borders they want to shrink their borders. Our presidents have been trying to get Israel to trade land for peace with countries that don't even recognize their right to exist. That didn't work with Bill Clinton. George Bush tried the same thing with his roadmap plan, 3 phases. It's sitting in the archives collecting dust. It didn't work. The worst one of them all is Barack Obama, who's adopted the Saudi peace initiative. It's originated by the Arabs. Who do you think it's going to favor? Israel? It's a land for peace deal. They want Israel to give up land they acquired in 1967 when they nearly tripled the sizes of their borders. And they want to give back East Jerusalem for the capital of a Palestinian state. They want the Palestinian refugees, which number in the millions in the West Bank and in the Gaza and around Jordan and various places around the Middle East. They want them to be able to come back into Israel proper because they think that's really was their land. It's not going to work, folks. John Kerry tried to push this vehemently, and it collapsed in April of 2014. It's not going to happen, folks. Israel's borders are not barely defensible as it is right now. They're going to win a war. I'm going to get through this tomorrow. And they're going to become a greater and safer Israel, the type of Israel that we find in Ezekiel 38. So we're trying to have Israel divide its land. And it's the very thing we're told that God judges the nations for in the end of time in Armageddon when he says, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations. They have also divided up my land. Okay, that's it, and that's in Armageddon. That's what we're doing. We're trying to get Israel to divide up its land. So we're trying to prepare for these prophecies. We're heading toward Ezekiel 38, but look what could happen in the middle. We're trying to forward information. And we have to ask ourselves as a country, and I'm going to hit you with a few questions, and I'll get more deep on this tomorrow as I do a report card on America. Many of you may have heard of 2 Chronicles 7:14. For a long time, when people saw America slipping down the tubes, they were quoting, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face, I will hear from heaven, forgive their sins, and heal their land. Okay? Now, some people are saying we're beyond that. That's not going to happen. Some people are saying we don't have a Nineveh moment of repentance nationally forthcoming. And if that's the case, then we have to be careful about what Jeremiah 7:16 says. When Jeremiah was warning the people of the southern kingdom of Judah, God said to Jeremiah, don't even pray for them anymore because the judgment's coming. They will not change. Okay? I'm not saying we're there yet, but if we are, then you have to look at Hosea 4:6, which means if there's judgment and destruction coming to this country, people will suffer. The people who can avoid the suffering are the people that have the understanding and the knowledge and the prophetic warnings that they need to have. These prophecies that I'm telling you about, in my humble estimation, have not been fulfilled and are nearing fulfillment. And I'm trying to give you the information that I think you should be on the lookout for. Hosea, when he spoke in Hosea chapter 4, he was mainly talking to the northern kingdom of Israel. He was warning them. Amos had done it. Isaiah had done it. warned the northern kingdom that destruction was going to come, and it did come in 722 BC by the Assyrian Empire. And the very beginning of it, we're clear. He's talking to all the inhabitants, believers and unbelievers in the northern kingdom. And as we get down to the end of Hosea chapter 4, he's saying that those that lack understanding will get trampled. Meaning that if you have the understanding, you can get yourself prepared for what's about to come. So we have to ask ourselves in this country, has money become our God? Has greed become our motivator? Have we kicked God out of our schools? Have we legalized abortion? Have we become the moral polluter of the earth? And are we turning our back on Israel? Because these are bad areas to be transgressing in. Like I said, I'm going to do the report card tomorrow. I'm not going to give it all out right now. Has God been giving us remedial judgments, which he does when he tries to warn a country that's falling away from him? Has he been sending us the prophetic voices like Jonathan Cahn to try to let us know that we're astray? Has he given us the leaders we deserve? This is what happens before judgment, which leads to ultimately destruction of a nation or an empire. How? What are some possible scenarios if we're headed in that direction? Could we have an economic collapse? I know that some of us are very concerned about that. What about an external nuclear attack, such as an electromagnetic pulse, an EMP, which, I don't know if you knew this, but on July 4th of this year, 2 Russian nuclear jets flew 40 miles off the coast of California and went on some kind of shortwave radio and spoke to our military and said, Happy Independence Day. Now, if you launch this is a nuclear weapon, and if you launch it at 180 miles above an area and burst it, the firebomb detonates up there, it shoots out at the speed of light like a canopy and fries everything electronic underneath it. It can happen if you're 40 miles off the coast of California. That's a really easy way to get that over the middle of the country. Or a tanker out in the Atlantic shooting over. These are legitimate concerns. Internal terrorist attack. Are we going to see a bunch of ISIS people coming into our country? There's already concerns by the CIA director, James Comey, that we've got ISIS concerns in all 50 states. He's announced that. What would it take for them to infect themselves with a deadly virus and hit a bunch of major cities and put us all under quarantine before we could even realize what hit us? Or a dirty bomb to go off in some sports arena? What about the rapture? What if God took all the believers out of this country? Don't get too excited yet. Well, I think we better throw that in the gap, because in my books, I point out why I don't believe the church has to be here for Ezekiel 38. Whoops. Wait a second here. Oh, there we go. This is about Israel in Ezekiel 38. It doesn't say I'm going to uphold my holy name in the midst of my people, the church. See, it's all about there being Jews in the land. That's why Hitler couldn't destroy them, or no one could destroy them, because they're the chosen people, and the land is the promised land. And I'm not sitting here saying the Jews are all in great standing. The point is, God made an unconditional covenant that they would exist forever. He promised that to Abraham, and that they would have a land forever. He's got them back in that land. This is turning the hourglass around. We're in the final days. And now when he destroys this most massive Mideast invasion that's forthcoming, and the Gog and Magog invasion, and it will be clear that he did it, no one else, and he can slam dunk the football in the end zone and say, I am the promise-keeping God. Now you guys need to make your choice, because there's a deception coming and there's an antichrist coming, and he's going to be very persuasive. So I'm going to give you an opportunity now, and I believe this is a pre-trib event, Ezekiel 38, and I put my reasons in my works out there. And I believe the rapture is a pre-trib event. Matter of fact, I think the rapture could happen at any given time, and I hope you are ready for it. I hope you are doing your rapture exercises. And we get into that in 1 Corinthians and 1 Thessalonians, because we are saved from the wrath that's going to come as God judges his planet. Romans 5:8-9. It is Jesus who is going to deliver us from that wrath in 1 Thessalonians. We are not appointed to that wrath. We are the bride of Christ. We're going to be kept from the hour of trial that comes over the whole world, we're told in Revelation 3, which is dealing with the tribulation in context. And we are told to comfort one another with these words. Now, I can't stand here and comfort you with these words if I tell you you're going to go through the wrath of God and through the tribulation period, and he's going to come and get you when your eyes are black and your bones are broken, and you're just barely breathing. Okay? Folks, I don't believe that's going to happen to us. Now, could we be like affected by these prophecies that are forthcoming? Yes, we absolutely could. Could we have a terrorist scenario like 9/11 on a much larger scale, multi-layered? Yes, we really could. And that what's going on in Syria right now? What's going on in Iran right now? There are Christians being severely persecuted over there. I'm going to try to see if a video will play. Can we get some sound?
It's normal in Iran. Let me tell you this story. This man called me on the air, on the live program, and he said, 3 months ago I had liver problem, and I called you, and you prayed for me, and I got healed. And I was saying, praise the Lord, praise the Lord. And he was not excited. He had such a monotone voice. And then I prayed for others. I prayed for somebody with tumor. He got healed. One of my relatives had cancer. I prayed, and she got healed from her cancer. And here I was saying, oh, praise the Lord, praise the Lord. After 3-4 minutes of this, he got frustrated with me. He stopped. He said, Pastor Hormoz, why are you so excited? Have you read your Bible? This is normal. It must happen. I mean, he had no emotions. And here I was so excited. For him, it was normal. For those people, it is normal that Jesus does miracles. Even in Quran, they look at Jesus as a miracle worker.
In Iran, it's really interesting. 2 years ago, Ahmadinejad and the Ayatollah issued a decree because Christianity was burgeoning so much that they were going to close down all home churches and persecute all pastors, imprison all pastors and persecute all Christians. So now there aren't technically no more home churches. There are, but they're very hush-hush because it's a real criminal offense over there. What they do now, and one of the disciples of Hormoz Shariat, who now has his own ministry, his name is Mansour, and I'm in constant contact with him, and he's in charge of over 3,000 different pastors over there in Iran. He's a big, high-profile target. And in fact, his real name isn't really Mansour. And whenever we recently did a DVD together, and he has to be pixelated on his face and that sort of thing. But what they do, many of the people over there are open. They're just very disenchanted with Islam in Iran. And so what happens is they will hook up with a family, and they will start doing a curriculum of teaching, and they'll talk about Adam, because Adam is common with Islam and Christianity and Judaism. Then they'll talk about Noah the next week. Then they'll talk about Abraham after that. And they build up through a sequence of lessons. And in the middle of that time frame, usually after the first lesson, someone inevitably has a dream or a vision. And they can't wait to get the guy back to teach on it. Yeah. Common when you hear of Muslim conversions, they've had a dream, vision, or a healing. Because you know why? Well, let me finish. By week 6, they introduce him to Jesus. His name is Isa. They believe in him, but they think he's a prophet in Islam. And the conversion rate is almost 100%. And they become the home church. And the family then now reaches out to other people because they won't rat on each other. That's what's going on over there. Why is God doing this? Well, we know God's loving heart, right? He wishes that none would perish, that all would have everlasting life, right? On the evangelistic menu of the end times, yes, the gospel, yes, creation, yes, eschatology. People can get saved by hearing these types of prophecies, going, wow, I appreciate that, God. But miracles, dreams, and visions. God knew there would come a time where there would be places where Jonah couldn't get into, or missionaries would scarcely be able to go, and he would do the work himself. And that's what he's doing. He's making this happen in these afflicted areas. In Syria, there are so many refugees now, millions of them. You see a map of where they're scattered around. 12 million people have been affected, 6.5 million displaced. Refugees all over the place because of this 3.5-year revolution. Now ISIS is just capturing them. They just captured 60 Christians today out of a population of 230. These people had fled Aleppo, now just captured them. They're going to probably be on the news. They're probably going to be beheaded or burned or something. And these are men, women, and children. Okay, this is what's going on over there, and that's why God's reaching out to them. In those refugee camps, you have a phenomenon that's amazing. Mafida's widows. This is a Mafia, lost her husband and her family, and she's got what's called a widow sisterhood. And she's in an area, these are fairly recent pictures, of 500,000 refugees by the Turkish border. And she's teaching them from the Bible. These are widows who lost their children and their husbands, or have seen them maimed, or this sort of thing. That's how bad it is, folks. And she asked them after they read the Bible, who would like to accept Christ? And they all raise their hand. And then they all take their altar call or the sinner prayer. And look how happy they are now. Because the Word became flesh and dwelt among them, and they found out that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. So as I close, I'm hoping I can play this video, and I hope you can read it in the back, because it's partially English, but it's partially translated in Farsi. And it's a true story. And this gal's name is Padina, and her story is incredible, her testimony. She is married to Mansour. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a build-up on it, so that when you watch it, and I'm going to conclude with this, you'll understand how significant this is. Matter of fact, I'm going to try to play the video and tell you the story, because it would be better that way. If you can't read it, raise your hand and I'll translate it back there.
Hopelessness and despair. These are the words that best describe the current situation in Iran. As a result, Iran has one of the highest suicide rates in the world. Hi, my name is Hormoz Shariat, and I'm the president of Iran Alive Ministries. What you're about to see is an actual story that happened here during a broadcast at Iran Alive. This is a story of a life transformed by the power of the gospel. Watch this, and I will see you after the video.
Can you read that?
و حتی مثلا از سن 4-5 سالگی شروع کردم نماز رو یاد گرفتن و مثلا قبل از اینکه وارد مدرسه بشم سوره های قرآن رو حفظ میکردم. دین هستن، اینا خیلی شستشون مغزی ما رو میکردن و اگرم یه همچین چیزی میشنیدم خوشحال میشدم، ولی همیشه به ما میگفتن حتی اگر یه مسیحی رو بکشیم وارد بهشت میشیم. و برای همین بیشتر تلاش میکردم که قانونهای مذهب رو دقیق‌تر انجام بدم. فکر میکردم وضو اشتباه گرفتم، دوباره هی میرفتم وضو میگرفتم، شاید این مثلا برای یه نماز 10 بار تکرار میشد که من میرفتم وضو میگرفتم و برمیگشتم. و مریضی روحی هم که گرفتم، افسرده وحشتناکم بودم. احساس کردم که هیچ وقت به خدا نرسیدم و مامانم تو حالت مرگ بود. خیلی هم وابسته بودم به مامانم و گفتم که من خودم رو میکشم اگه اجازه ندید تو خونه این کار رو بکنم، بیرون از خونه خودکشی.
تو جوونی، تو آینده داری مامان جان.
و گفتم باشه، اگر دوست داری با هم خودکشی کنیم.
Brothers and sisters, I'm with you tonight. The Lord has a special message for you tonight. If you're hopeless, if you're oppressed, if you're planning to commit suicide, the Lord says stop. He has a hope and a future for you. If you're planning to kill yourself, stop and call me.
و برای نیم ساعت با کشورما صحبت کرد. کاری که کردم انجام میدم و اگر تو بخوای پشیمون بشی، من خودم تنها این کار میکنم. وقتی که رفتم توی اتاق دیدم مامانم داره دعای توبه رو میکنه و خیلی عصبانی شدم.
به من ندیران، نه چش میکنم، نمیخوام باش حرف بزنم، بلم کن، نمیخوام، قطع کن بینم چی داره خدا فردینا، نمیخوام، لجبازی نکن، قطع کن، رجالت بگیر. هرمز مگه کیه؟ بلم کن، کشیش هرمز کیه؟ ولی شما گفتین اگه کسی
When I talked to her, she was
cold.
بله من
She
پروینا
was
هستم.
fighting, and she told me very proudly, I'm going to kill myself, and your Jesus cannot do anything for me. After about an hour of argument with her, and I couldn't change her mind.
عیسی من به تو ایمان میارم.
You said it yourself. Allah has done nothing for you. Give Jesus just one chance. You can always kill yourself next week.
وقتی که این فکر اومد توی سرم گفتم این بهترین راهه که یه بار دیگه تا آخرین لحظه مرگم به الله خدمت کنم.
She was thinking, okay, I'll pray, and next week, this time, Jesus had not done anything for me. I call live on the air, and I tell everybody, look, I tried Jesus for a week, and nothing has changed, and I'm going to kill myself tonight, and I would do it on the air.
و بعد از یک هفته که خودکشی میکنم حداقلش اینه که وقتی به حضور خدا میرم میگم آخرین کارم من برای تو انجام دادم. فردا صبحش که از خواب بیدار شدم، ساعت نیمه شب بود که از خواب بیدار شدم، دیدم که مامانم خیلی راحت داره تو خونه راه میره و دیگه اونطوری نیست که تعادل نداشته باشه یا دستش رو جایی بگیره. گفتم ما باید سریع بریم بیمارستان و وقتی که جوابو سریع گرفتیم دکتر گفتش که فقط میتونم بگم یه معجزه شده چون هیچ اثری از بیماری MS نیست.
چجوری میشه؟ شما خودتون گفتین که ایشون ترمینال بود،
فقط
داشت
نشون خانم یه معجزه است و به یه امام دعا کردین. شما کجا نشون دادین؟ خانم این شب یک معجزه است. این یک معجزه است.
ما اصلا به هیچ امامی دعا نکردیم. به عیسی مسیح دعا کردیم.
So, how was that? So Padina got married to Mansour, and she came over and worked for Homo Shariat for a while. And she was so excited and everything, and after a while she said to Hormoz that she wanted to go back to Iran. And he said, why do you want to go back to Iran? Because it's really bad over there. And she said, well, God is working there, and I believe that Satan is singing lullabies to the church in America. Satan is singing lullabies to the church in America. Anyway, that's my presentation, and if you want to know more about that, I got stuff out on the resource table, and if you want to really see tomorrow night, I want to see you.